being watched. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I was saying, Scott, is that when I talked to you in Vegas, I
Mhm.
noticed that you had an educated perspective on things. You didn't just have like I, I feel like a lot of people kind of get jaded in certain ways or like this
Mm,
kind of crazy bias. And when I talked to you, you were really easy to go from being someone that said like would say something and then you'd immediately be like thinking about like, well, I just processed that because I said it, and now I actually have a different opinion on it.
mm,
And or like in the middle of a conversation, if I was having with you, I would be able to ask a question, and then that immediately you wouldn't get so far down the rabbit hole that you wouldn't be able to come back and actually have a logical thought about what you just said. I know people
right.
that just kind of rant about stuff too, and they kind of just stay in that mode the whole time. But regardless of that, I just kind of saw that as a good way to have a nice conversation with somebody because they can actually think about what they're saying and go back and talk about it some more.
Mm,
For those of you, anyone that doesn't know who Scott is, he's an amazing acrobat. Made his way into Vegas. He's been through the process of auditioning and you know and going through all that out there. He's also he's also had to deal with a lot of injuries throughout the years. And I didn't even know I was watching a lot of his videos before until I kind of went back like, oh, that was him. Like
mm,
and that's what kind of tends to happen. And I think initially I might have seen you on the Acrobatic site, on the Acrobatic's Facebook page, a little while back, and maybe before then, maybe just saw you occasionally because I myself am kind of a slightly reclusive person. So, and that's not like I'm not antisocial. I love being around people. I don't mind like not being around people, but I tend to because of where I came from with training and everything. It was always like there was nobody else to do it with. So it was just I got so used to that, and I'm like, okay, well, just go out in your backyard and do something, or go out and just train on your own. And I got so used to doing that that I don't need a group of people to encourage me to do stuff. So I just get used to doing it, even though I love doing it with a group of people, if possible. But so that's where I come from. But when I noticed when I got to Vegas and I was talking to everybody, I'm like, wow, these guys are. It's this nice little hub here, and these guys have, not all the time, maybe not right now, but you guys have each other to kind of push these ideas off of all the time, which is always great. It's kind of like this movement tank instead of a think tank. It's like a movement tank, and you guys are kind of just developing this stuff, and you get pulled off each other's, and of course the internet's helping too. But
mhm.
so for everyone that doesn't know, I thought Scott would be. I didn't know the order I was going to do with these interviews, but Scott answered first, so
Hey,
let it be done. Um,
sweet.
and what I want to start with first, actually, is just talking about kind of where did you start out as um, in the movement game, and then going from just starting out with that, like what's your origin, what's your what was your encouragement to do stuff when you were younger? Maybe you started later, maybe you started as a late acrobat. I don't know, but let's just start with that, and then if we go on some tangents, we'll go that direction. We have plenty of time.
Oh, okay. So a lot of people, a lot of non-gymnasts have a misconception that I was a gymnast, but a lot of gymnasts can really see the form and my lack thereof that I was not a gymnast. Um, I started as a martial artist, and from martial arts, I got into kicking when around 12, so 2000, 2001-ish.
What
And
kind of martial arts are you involved in?
originally, I go jiu-jitsu, and then I was taking, they said karate, but it really was more like MMA and Krav at the time.
Hmm.
But this was also before it became such a sort of popularized bro sport.
Okay.
Not to, I mean, the level has escalated super high since then, but it was very much a fad where I lived in Southern California, maybe 7 years after that, just to be like, bro, I do UFC. And it's like, nah. But in any case, I took one gymnastics class when I was 4 and hated it and thought that the coaches were sadists. So that was the end of that.
What did they make you
But
do? Do you remember?
yeah, I did actually the headstands against the wall and what they called teddy bear stands, which were headstands with your knees on your elbow, which was maybe a good trainer for air babies like 50 years later. But and a lot of probably spotted, but of course when you're 4 you don't really realize you're being spotted, chin-ups. And I was
Okay.
just like, I don't understand why I would want to do this. This just sucks.
Were you already
Turns
pretty
out,
strong at that age? Like, were you like could have done chin up on your
um,
own?
yeah, yeah. No, I was already decent strong, more flexible than anything. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had very hypermobile elbows, and I could put both feet behind my head, no problem, which I think of most kids. But I used to freak out my PE teacher by doing push-ups, and then when I got to the top, just like locking out, super
Yeah.
ostrich-like.
Exorcist
Uh,
push-ups, like kind of weird stuff like that.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Never knew I could do the splits because, of course, when you're a little boy, everyone's like, "Boys can't do the splits," so I
Oh
never even
yeah,
tried.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the reason I'm stopping you along the way is because there's all these little precursors that I think kind of
Mhm.
show a lot with people that even though they put the time in are better movers than others. And you kind of see
Mhm.
these little things along the way. So you said you were already pretty flexible. Now I know most kids they don't explore it a lot of the times because their parents don't encourage it because they don't know any better. But the flexibility part of it, was that something that or the mobility? For those people that don't know, flexibility is your passive range of motion. Mobility is your active range of motion. So this is my mobility, but I can put my shoulder on hand on the floor and twist myself around and go a lot farther. And the reason I'm asking that question is because a lot of us will have passive flexibility a lot farther than active. So the reason I'm asking Scott about this is because he said when he was younger he could already put his feet behind his head. Now, is that Lotus or is that the other way?
That would be this way, so more Lotus style.
Okay, so you could do
But
that. Okay.
I could also probably have gone that way if I had known about it. I remember when I was in 4th grade, we had like a flexibility test, and the only 3 people in the class who could pass it were me, a gymnast girl, and a dancer girl.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, it was like hands on the floor next to your feet in a pike position. It wasn't like, oh, crazy contortion. It was just like, are you somewhat predisposed to this?
Yeah, so it was like pike, bridge, split, and then hands behind your back kind of thing.
Yeah, it was all like the sit and reach kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
like one of the girls arched back into a stand. I was like, nope. But then again, I'm kind of curious if I had known, actually, I probably could have gotten not that far by any means, but
Hmm.
far.
So even though you said you could do the splits already, right? At that age?
I could have, but I didn't know. I learned how to do the splits, specifically splits, when I was about 13, 14.
Hmm.
And it was tough for me, but I also think, honestly, the thing that kind of is the undercurrent to all the things I've ever done was I always enjoyed learning and I was always self motivated.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I never needed someone to tell me to do things. In fact, I resented people telling me to do things.
So
But
you're a rebel with motivation, pretty much.
yeah, like I was very coachable when it came to martial arts because I was just like, yes, sir, and would just do whatever I was told to do to the most ridiculous extent. And that was how I got flexible. Basically, I was like, oh, I need to get flexible. So I would get up an hour before school or an hour before I left for school and just torture stretch myself. And then torture stretch myself at the dojo. And then I had my middle splits flat in about 3 months.
Hmm.
And
So you'd carry out the
also,
orders with like ridiculous intent.
yeah, exactly. And I still stretch the same way to this day. Like I also do nice chill classes, but like if I really want to get better at it, which sometimes I do, I will roll my little lacrosse ball to ridiculous degrees of pain. I'll take deep tissue massages for 2.5 hours where like it's
Hmm.
just awful.
Hmm.
I'll stretch extremely hard. But I've also learned, especially as an adult, that if you go too hard when you do that, you often wind up feeling like you're about 1,000 years old the next day. So I've kind of learned what a decent extent to push yourself to is, especially with regards to if you have access to cooling down or warming up regularly. Because with stretching in particular, your body does get cold after 20 to 30 minutes of stretching, whether you feel it or not. So I always used to train in intervals of go jump on the trampoline, get my body warm, start to sweat a little bit, go straight until like my body no longer actively producing that warmth, repeat until I was too noodly to bounce on the trampoline, because once your back is shy. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll go back to your story in just a second, but there's already some great places you're going down with this. And so I remember, so when I was I went to school for dance at ASU, and I was probably the stiffest person there by far. They wanted me there as an educator eventually because they saw that I had this ability to talk to people, and before I knew that. And so it's always kind of cool how your teachers see that, but good teachers. But I remember with the flexibility work, like when I came out of college, I felt like I was looser because I was doing a lot more modern dance, a lot more ballet kind of did it, but modern dance did it a lot because it's all about release technique and looking like you have no effort to do what you do, along those lines. And I remember coming out of it, and some of it could be age too, but some of that's kind of hodgepodge in my opinion, why I feel stiffer now. But yeah, what I noticed is that like this, when you say you're training flexibility, and you say like when you're actually training, like, because you're not really moving a whole lot when you're training flexibility, you get a little bit of fear in you, and that can kind of bring your heart rate up a little bit, and that can make you get a sweat going and things along those lines. But the reason you're working so hard is because you're at your end range, and so your muscles are like, I can't, and so they're like, you're fighting that the whole time. But you're not doing something like you said, when you're doing trampoline and swinging your arms up super hard and you have to squeeze everything. That's work, that's a different type of work, and that's getting blood flow. So that's really interesting that you coupled, like you would purposefully, like, let's say, how long were you training flexibility for? Would it matter? Was it more like until I feel like I can't do anything else?
Kind of. I would usually do this during open gym sessions, particularly at Tempest, and those would be our sessions. So I would go in with a certain list of goals, whether it be things on trampoline, tramp wall, floor, bars occasionally, but I avoid bars, to be perfectly honest, and also flexibility. So once I had kind of felt like, okay, I've accomplished most of what I'm here to do, quit while you're ahead, and then start working on something.
That's great.
That I have to basically, because I can't do flexibility and come back to any of those things. Like I can to a certain extent, like, okay, my back and my splits are really good. Let's go do hand balancing and try and make a pretty shape.
Yeah.
Or go on the trampoline and do some weird Adam Menzies inspired like arch and grab stuff while I'm twisting. But in terms of actual like big tricks, I can't even bounce properly up and down if I'm stretched out. And I'm hardly a contortionist by any means, but still.
Yeah, no, totally. That's I think a lot of. I've seen. Oh, I did an experiment once when I used to teach at ASU. I taught a parkour class at ASU, and everyone was like, "Why don't we stretch more before we train?" I was like, "All right, you dummies, this is why." And so I made them all stretch. I made them all stretch for like a half an hour prior to our training. This was kind of mean, but it was a good lesson. They're like, "Oh, we feel so good and loose." I'm like, "Yeah, go do a jump." And and then like they jump and actually their takeoff's okay, and then they go to land and they have no responsive power because all the stretch reflexes turned off, right? So they're just like, they land, there's like they just kind of splat, and they're like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Well, you just did all this great feeling stretching like that, but now you're not fired up for athletic ability anymore." And I know there's more scientific ways to explain that, but that was the best way for me to show to them, this is why we're doing dynamic work at the beginning. And we get our level up. We might do some light, like 10-second stretching, just so that you're like, okay, it might do something for you in some kind of way. But we're not going to do this 30 seconds and beyond stretch. We're not going to go into 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute stretches, because it's just going to screw up your power, along the way, and you won't have any control. So, like when you said, like, after a while, like then you're just like kind of slopping around. Yeah. And that's why, like, have you ever gotten to the point with stretching that you start getting slurred speech?
Possibly. I can't really pinpoint any time that would have happened, but I've definitely had times where I just feel kind of delirious from it.
Yeah, like I think it has to do something with you've pushed your nervous system pretty far, and so then it kind of like, it's just kind of like this kind of dizziness kind of feeling. I weighed it sometimes. I used to get it when I would do like long yard work, or I would do it like, or like a heavy squat day when I used to do a lot more lifting. And then the next day, usually later on that day, I would just be like, I'd be so taxed in my nervous system that I just kind of would have a hard time like making conversation. Like sometimes they would be sounding like that a little bit. But I noticed it a lot too from heavy stretching sometimes, or like you'd even get this feeling like you wanted to throw up or something like that in the middle of your stretch, because you're really pushing that pain threshold and you have to stay calm in some sort of way. And so that's like your body's like, get rid of everything that could possibly make this worse, including the food you just ate or whatever, you know? 3 hours ago, whatever the hell it was. But that's interesting you said that. Like, I like that we're seeing some, when you're talking about flexibility and they're training you, like you did it at the end. And I think it's something that everybody needs to know. Like, save it for the end, or unless you're just doing flexibility and that's your art form. If that's just your art form alone, then fine. But if you're going to go jump around, flip around, and you've seen the Gumby people that come in, they're really flexible, and then they don't have any strength. There's like no strength there. I think I remember, might have been Coach Somers might have said this a long time ago from Gymnastic Bodies, but I think he said, like, I'd rather work with a tight, strong person than a flexible, weak person. And that's nothing that's wrong with someone being flexible. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that if you're trying to produce power and trying to be strength and trying to do things that involve speed and everything like that, it's a lot harder to do that if your body is geared toward mobility and flexibility only. Anyway,
there's a guy who I follow on Instagram and YouTube, he's contortionist called Alexander Batuev, and he's a really interesting guy because he's got tutorials on YouTube of flexibility. It covers like back bending, front bending, like legs behind head, lotus, splits. Some of them are in Russian, some of them are in English, but they're super good. It breaks down the whole process of conditioning your stretching and warming up in intervals with your stretching and sort of compartmentalizing your stretching. So for example, if you're doing a pike stretch, he's like, it's not just do this all of a sudden and you're not supposed to be all hunched. You want to stretch basically everything on the back line of your body, from your feet through your calves, your hamstrings, your hips, your glutes, your lower back, your upper back, even your neck. And essentially, if you can break down all these different individual parts, the sum total will get much better. But if you're just trying to stretch everything at a time, it's not going to work very well for you.
Yeah, well, well, you'll immediately go toward, this is kind of an FRC approach, you're immediately going to go toward the weakest part of your stretch. Your body will kind of attack that. The strongest part will bend, but then it's like, okay, well, where's the weakest part of this? And then you'll feel it there. And maybe that's not the spot that actually needs to be stretched. Maybe that's not the spot that needs it. It's taking the impact. But then like when you talked about your feet, like that was actually something fairly new for me, because I've always had like these elephant feet that are just really hard to make point. I mean, I've been working on it because I've been like, well, I just been doing a couple points here and there, holding the position, and it's getting better. But I remember my ballet teacher saying like, wow, you got some stable ankles there. And I thought that was a compliment, but really it was more like your feet, you have elephant feet. So I have really strong, stiff ankles, and they're very good at taking impact, but making them point was very difficult. So the other, about a year ago, I saw somebody from a martial art competitive area, whatever, was saying like when they do their stretches, when they do splits, they actually take time and they beat the crap out of their feet like this to kind of loosen them up, like just kind of like tenderize them a lot and do all the stuff to them. And I didn't realize that, I mean, I knew they do striking with it, and I thought that had something to do with that whenever I saw these warm-ups, and they might have had nothing to do with stretching, and they, because people pass down stuff all the time that you have no idea what the hell it's for. But he was saying that if you think about your feet touching the floor, they're the first thing in contact with the floor. If that's stiff, everything else up the area is probably going to be affected by that as well. So the idea that there's this chain, that's kind of hindering you along the way, and if you had like a rubber band, and different parts of the rubber band had like stiff metal in it or stiff like wood in it, like the bendy parts obviously are going to bend, and then those wooden parts are going to be holding you back. So working on those other spots individually is going to help you along the way. Yeah, sometimes I get those. Um, so let's see. Let's go back to your story. I cut you off at gymnastics, so we didn't get very far. So let's see. You were doing pull-ups and you were doing cruddy air babies, which were called teddy bear things, and then you were also doing headstands against the wall. So let's go back to there and then continue from there.
So yeah, so I did literally one class and just decided no, it was not for me because I didn't understand the concept of conditioning at the time. I just kind of thought like, oh, you are born inherently this or that, and realized, oh, this is to make you stronger and get you better at things, because I was 4. But yeah, so then I started doing martial arts and to America when I was 9, started doing more martial arts. And then when I was in 8th grade, the girl who sat next to me in my foods class was doing martial arts as well. And she said that some of the instructors at the dojo did tricking. And I had just started trying to get into tricking and capoeira, looking at like text and little stick figure drawings on the internet, because this was long before streaming video.
How old were you then?
Yeah. 11, 12.
Okay, 11 and 12.
Yeah. Well, no, not in 8th grade. In 8th grade, I was 13, 14. But I had already started trying to do my living in my backyard at that point, and it was just kind of like pathetic. It was just tornado kicks and butterfly kicks without having any feedback and any real meaningful resources to learn from. Because, yeah, to download a video that was a minute long would take hours at that point. And so there was a website called Chimp's Lair, and also another one called Jubei's Martial Arts Zone, and another one that was ridiculous called Combastics. Actually, I think it had a different name, and that turned into Combastics, or vice versa. Neobody, that other name.
Jubei, like Ninja Wars Jubei from like the anime?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably. And that was actually how I found tutorials and all that. Somebody posted a link in the forum there to the original incarnation of Tricks tutorials right when it first came out. And over there, Juji looking for someone to spell and grammar check the website. So I did that. And then here we are.
Wait, so you grammar checked whose website?
Juji's.
Okay. So you were working with Juji a long time ago then?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, like 18, 19 ago or whatever. It wasn't for money or anything. I was just a bored 14-year-old kid who enjoyed spell checking and grammar checking things. Yeah, which is ironic because now I type with no punctuation whatsoever. But,
yeah, spell checked. Tricks. Cool. So you guys had a bit of a.
Sorry, what was that?
You guys had a strong connection a long time ago, so that makes a lot more sense about some of the more current stuff that you guys have done together. Were you at all involved in their gatherings or anything? Are you in some of the original videos of those?
A couple. My first gathering was New York Gathering 2005, so that was around between Christmas and New Year's Eve 2005, transitioning into 2006.
Okay.
Or was it 2004 to 2005? I don't remember, but it was around then. And
how old are you now? Sorry.
Right now I'm 32.
Okay.
So I was about 15 or 16 at the time.
Okay.
And then I went to the Gathering 2006, which was right after I graduated high school. So I was 18 then. And then I didn't really go to any gatherings for a long time. I was working at a show in Santa Cruz for the summer of 2013, and Loop Kicks was very nearby. So I went up and checked out the Loop Kicks gathering for like a day. Then I had back and do shows, and it was kind of funny because I did not recognize virtually anyone from the tricking community at that point. Like people like Alu, Scott Skeleton, they knew me and had met me before and all that. So it was all like, oh, hey, good to see you guys and all that. But the sort of newer generation, which was a lot of people like Nick Fry, Bailey Payne, what's his nuts? Go like, yeah, like I didn't know any of them. I could see their videos occasionally, but wouldn't have pointed them out in a crowd or anything like that. I just saw a bunch of people doing swing throughs, and to me, swing throughs were very strange and alien because around 2003, 2004, that's when they first started getting more popularized as the French style of tricking, with like team striking Z, and then it became the European style of tricking as the Scandinavians started catching on to it, and things like Giga Gathering kind of made it bigger. Then like Teddy, Punchy, all those guys really took it to a crazy level because Teddy did his double B twist swing double cork, and that was mind blowing at the time. Then now it's just tricking in general. Like it's really, I feel like it moved away from the martial arts background, which was what it very, very purely was when I got into it. So, like, oh, you 540 to aerial. Oh, sick. Put it in your form. And then now it's like, okay, so you've been tricking for half a week. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like the tricking has kind of, I mean, as you can see from the endorsements and where money has flowed, you have obviously just the tricks themselves, which are just focusing more on how many twists you can do, and some really crazy, I mean, you know, it's like you said, it's requiring more and more of this very specific body type to be able to do well. You know, I mean, people break that all the time based on how fast they can move, but so you have that, and then you also have the board breaking, which is more about tricking with kicks, and that's where the martial art background comes in sometimes. So
there's been a little bit of a resurgence of kicking recently, though. I've noticed some of the guys like Eduardo, don't really remember how to spell his last name, but Eduardo R, and this one guy, Anthony Basiaga, something along those lines. I can't remember exactly his last name, but a young kid who's doing flares and windmills in his tricking combos and doing some really nice kicks. Or Aiden Kennedy, people like that. I feel like there's a little bit of like slight resurgence of the kicking style, and I don't know if that's propagated by adrenaline or just people trying to kind of be retro with their tricking, or just different, step away from, oh, everyone's doing all the twists, so now maybe I should do something different.
I definitely think the twisting has gone it's not gone as far as it can go, but it's definitely to the point where it's like, if you're not built for it, you better find something else to do, because there's going to be someone that can always twist better than you. Like, I remember the first time I saw this old trampoline footage. This guy did 7 twists on a trampoline. He was like a circus artist, you know, and tilted really hard and everything. But I mean, that was like, and so anytime someone's like, I already saw the most twists you can do, like a long time ago, you know. And so when someone's like, oh, I'm trying, you know, I'm not on floor, it's like 5 is like, I think maybe the max you probably could do. Someone's going to break that and show me, but whatever. Yeah, someone will break it. Break themselves while trying. So just as admirable. But yeah, I mean, for me, like, it took me forever to get just to that level of, like, I did a cork by accident my first time doing it, and I was wearing, I don't know how the hell I did it. I was wearing like boots, and it was at like we were having a Halloween tricking party, and I just invited people to come down to because I had started an open gym where I worked at. And so I invited some people to come down, and people actually showed up. I'm like, oh, great, people are actually here. And because, I mean, in my community with the parkour group, like, I was doing, because I started out more with breakdancing and that kind of stuff, and then I started doing tricking in the park, whatever, and I didn't have anything I could do, a 540 an aerial, butterfly twist, Nunchaku, Aubatido, you know, I did all those basic ones. I remember these guys showed up, and I just remember running forward and doing a gainer, swinging my leg, and then I was like, I think I'll try to twist. And then I twisted. So I late twisted, and I landed on my feet, and I was like, what did I do? You know, and it all came together. I couldn't do it again after that. It was but like, that was something like I never thought I'd be able to do. And then in my prime, like when I was 26, when I was the right weight and everything like that along those lines, and fastest I was, most powerful I was training 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day, whatever like that. And I was able to finally get like a double twist out of a round up back handspring on spring floor, and maybe a double cork off of like a 6-inch block, and then land on the mat. And like, but man, people are just so good at it. And I think it's interesting to see that gap. And like you said, like, since you're 32, I'm 34, so I feel like we probably saw a lot of the same things. You more so than me, for sure, because like, I would just see things occasionally. I didn't know where to look. I found Juji's tricks tutorials, like when I got into college, and I like watched it for a year. Then I kind of went away from that when dance said, okay, you need to focus on your dance and stop flipping around and hurting yourself. I'm like, okay. So I had to go do that for a bit. And then I came back like a year later, and these people were saying like, oh yeah, there's, was it Billy Byling or something like that. There was that place, and then there was all these other people, and Bailey was popping up at that time. And that was like around, and that's when I started noticing him and some other people, Scott Skelton, and that whole thing. And people were like worshiping Scott Skelton and Michael Guthrie and at that time. And why am I drawing a blank here with his name? Tron.
Anise.
Anise, yeah. And I feel so sorry. Sorry, Anise, didn't mean to block you there. Because I watch his stuff all the time too. It's actually some of the more enjoyable videos, in my opinion, are from him. Him in that Tin Man one, when they had the what's it called?
When they were in Thailand.
They did a one specifically. Maybe that's probably right. They did one specifically with the Karate Kid soundtrack background, and I was like, I always loved watching that.
Probably that one, because Tim's Swedish, so they wouldn't necessarily be in place unless they were filming something. But I think that was from like The Protector or Ong Bak or something like that. I can't remember what movie. I do remember they were working on the same project, and it was some kind of crazy Thai stunt movie, as they all seem to be. All four of the ones aware of it. But yeah, those were some good movies too. That's what got me into parkour specifically, was actually the Ong Bak chase scene. When they go across there, that's when I started emulating that kind of movement and got involved in that whole area right there. But sorry? Tony Jaa is crazy.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. Last video I saw from him, I started using CGI in his videos, and I was like, I know they use.
Yeah.
I know they used it a little bit in his original movies, but it was like he just did everything raw, and I was like, it was so impressive to see that.
Maybe once he got his money and realized, wait, maybe I don't have to destroy myself for this. I don't know.
Have you ever met him in person?
No.
No? Okay. All right, let's go back again. So tricks, you said the tricks tutorials, and then you kind of lost touch with everybody, and you came back around, everyone's doing swing throughs, and you're like, what is this witchery? And then and so then you're in college now, right? At that point, or I don't know, you went to college. Okay, so
I did, yeah. I went to a community college and got my associate's degree, and then I was going to music school, and or I could try and open a recording studio. And that was a stupid decision, because LA is full of recording studios with much higher budgets. So I lost any money that I had in the process, and then left and decided to finally audition for performing shows, because up until that point I had always avoided doing that, because I was afraid of taking like something that I really enjoyed and making it potentially feel like a chore or forced upon me. Which in retrospect was really stupid, because it turns out it's fun to do the things that you enjoy doing for work. But it definitely also has had its moments of feeling like a chore, because when you're performing for a living, it's not really on your it's your decision what you do at all times. It's not your decision when the shows are, what the show's content is, what the choreography is, things like that.
Yeah.
And same as literally any other industry, unless you're the headliner. And even then, you still have to answer to directors and ticket sellers and record companies and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah. I always found with performance work, like it was the leading up to it, the preparation for it, trying to get stuff ready for it, that was like the most fun of it, because you're like have a goal to work toward. And then when you're doing it, like the goal becomes, how do I last this whole time doing this? Like that becomes the next part, right? So then it becomes the long game at that point. But the hard part, I think most people in the movement field, if they perform, the hard part, I think, for them is that they're very inspiration driven. Now, I know motivation, inspiration, they're kind of different. Inspiration is like this spark, and then you go do something for 2 weeks, and then you don't have it anymore. Motivation is after that's done, you keep going with it, right?
Right.
So, but what I've seen is that, like, sometimes we would work on something, like let's say you're working on a box cutter, or let's say you're working on a jackknife or something, right? And like you work on it for like 2 or maybe a month, and then you kind of get as far as you can, you're kind of taxed out on it, so then you leave it alone for a little bit, right? And then you come back to it a month later, 2 months later, and you've been doing other things, and somehow you're much better at it.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah.
The coffee is destroying me. I'm going to run to the bathroom. I will be right back.
Go ahead, man. I'll do that too.
Nice timing.
Yeah.
So we were talking about motivation, inspiration, being influenced, and you were using the example of when you're working on a box cutter and then put it away for a bit.
Yeah, and what I was trying to get to with that is that I think a lot of people that do this stuff just for, that feel like, if they got into doing work with it, that they'd lose the passion for it. I mean, I think that a burnout can happen for sure, but it also is like, it also happens when you're not working as well, and that's the thing, is that like you kind of learn how to regulate not getting to that level and still enjoying it some. And so I think for like performers, a lot of times it's like, well, when I get so good at doing this in the routine that I can add maybe the next level thing to it after talking to my choreographer or whatever like that, that's kind of like how you regulate that, in some sort of way. Because I would think that most people that have been in it long enough, especially choreographers or producers in some sense, if they've had an athletic background themselves in some sort of way, they know that there's something that, people need something to drive them as well. As along with money is good too. So, but
Money.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to get to with this tangent at all is that if people are concerned about not having that inspiration, you kind of have to find a way, or that motivation, you kind of have to find that the thing within that constant daily life of working with what you do, to kind of find the spots in there that kind of permit that. And that's where, and it's really hard for people to see that, because if all you're doing is just the training part and just trying to up your level every single time, and you can take a break from that whenever you want, it's really hard to see how you can fit that into something. I had that problem too, and I'm very much happy that I've went more into performance work, because it actually opened up a lot of other things. Like I never thought I would start to do more fire work, and because first of all, I was like, I'm going to draw the line at fire, because why burn yourself, But it ended up being like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at doing some of the stuff people won't do with fire, or like I'm not Mr. Flowy artist that kind of moves around like a lizard when they're doing fire, but I look kind of more like maybe the kind of Islander kind of style of fire, which is a little bit more strong. I'm a man and I'm spitting fire. Yeah. It's like that kind of look, So, but yeah, there's always openings you get without realizing it.
For sure.
Not for what's that?
I said for sure.
For sure.
I do find in that if you approach performance from a purely athletic background, which is what I did, never really like, oh man, I want to be on stage, I want people to see me. I just enjoy training skills. And it was nice that by age I get paid to do the skills I train anyways.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I found like there's this cycle that you kind of go through where you're like, I want to train to get into shows, train. Oh, I'm good enough. I got into the show. Oh, but now that I'm in the show, I can't train and my skills are playing stagnant. And then you kind of come out the other end of that being like, I need to leave the show so I can train again. And I feel like seasonal contract, maybe 3 month long, summer, Halloween, to a lesser extent, because those are obviously shorter. But like summer contracts are great, Halloween contracts are great, Christmas contracts are great because it's like short work at a theme park. You maybe do 3 shows a day or something like that, but it's usually a good time because it's so short. You leave kind of at that moment where you're like, okay, this is fun, but like it's not the end all be all of this. Whereas I feel like when you're locked into a 1 or 2 year contract, sometimes you can't see that light at the end of the tunnel. And so people get kind of bogged down being like, losing my identity as an athlete rather than as a performer or something along those lines. And I mean, yeah, then within a longer contract, I feel like you have to find those specific aspects of things that you can work on, or it be, instead of working on this new trick, I'm going to work on my acting ability on stage. I'm going to work on how I move with this particular choreography. I'm going to conceptualize something different. I'm going to change the tricks I'm doing. And obviously with that, especially in a bigger company, you have to go with layers of permission and things like that. But still, it's something that keeps you sane when you're just doing the same thing over and over. Because people do think from the outside looking in, I feel like people who work in offices and things like that see performance and they're just like, oh, free spiritedness, like, oh, they're just living age. And it's like, yeah, you are, but you're also living that same thing at least twice a day, 5 days a week on stage. It's not like you go and see a show and you're like, that was cool, and you go home. But then the people who just did that show eat and then do that show again for another audience. And I think just sort of, it's a magical experience as an audience member, and as a cast member, it can become routine. So you have to find ways of keeping that spark for yourself.
Yeah. It also just makes it safer too, because then you don't become complacent and stop thinking about what's going on. But yeah, you'd be surprised for like, you know, if you just said, okay, I noticed that I got this gig, I'm doing well, but I noticed I don't really straighten my arms when I do this. I'm just going to try and focus on that. And you'd be surprised how much brain power that takes for you to just remember to, you know, to do that, you know, in the middle of doing something. Because for the past 10 years, 20 years, you've done it without doing that, you know? So it's a whole, it's a small thing to some people, but it's a lot of mental process to do it when you're moving as fast as you're moving and have all this other stuff going on. It's those small little things that can kind of keep you going. What was it I said? My wife had said something about, you had reminded me of something that I was going to say that she had said as well to me that kind of, dang, I should have said it while hopefully I'll come back to it.
Is it about the mental cycle of getting in just to get back out again, or something along those lines, maybe?
No, I did write that down as part of something I want to kind of like write up later. But no. Again, if it comes back to me, then I'll talk about it. It's okay. So all right, so you started doing gig work, okay, and you started getting contracts, I guess, doing contract work. Now, you lived your whole life in California? I'm sorry, no, you weren't in California. No. You're in Vegas now. So you went to LA to start to try and do video work, and you said that didn't work out. So where were you before then?
Vancouver, Canada.
Okay, so you came on down. Okay, started going back up that way. All right, so you were born in Vancouver, Canada? Oh, okay, cool. All right, and I think I remember I talked to you a little bit about Montreal and people like that, but we can get to that a little later or something. I don't remember. It was something we kind of talked about when I was at Circus Center with you, or overheard you talking to someone else about it. Let's go to your first couple of contracts and what that kind of really brought to light for you about this. Okay, if anything, like
they were terrible. They were so terrible. Without naming names, I was doing a certain show that required me to do quite a few shows a week, quite a few shows a day, and also the cast functioned as crew. So we, at the end, would tear down our set, which was no small order. It was really big, heavy pieces of metal and set pieces. And we would to show back up after the weekend and build them back up again because our stage was shared with bands that would perform over the weekend.
Okay.
And yeah, that was super fun. And I mean, I'm not opposed to helping by any means, but when there's only your cast who don't really know what they're doing in terms or with regards to construction work, and it is just very physically taxing on your body, especially when you've done, I don't know, 3 shows already a day. And in my case, I had to do tricking on concrete, Chinese pole, trampoline and tramp wall on an undersized trampoline with a frame underneath it that would bruise your spine if you landed on your back, if you didn't land in the box, which, spoiler alert, if you're doing 2-person tramp wall, you're never in the box. So yeah, it was just brutal. And I was making less than $80 a day for this. So that worked out to, I don't know, like $20 a show or something. Like, and it was not ideal, but I'm very, very grateful for it because it gave me perspective. And any show I've done since, any gig done where things seem to just be god awful or poorly run, I'm just like, at least it's not that, and at least I'm getting paid a lot more than I was for that. Like, and I also remember my first aerial gig was hilarious because I did not speak aerialist and I did not answer, so I kept being told, like, you need to center yourself, and I honestly didn't know if they were talking about something physical or if it was like, center yourself. And I was just like, I don't know what you're saying. Or like, oh no, like take passe and then go to coupe and then we're gonna do this little comeback thing. I'm like, I don't know what anything you just said means. Like, you're gonna have to.
You said what kind of gig was that? That was for aerial or for what? Interesting. Because
a lot of areas speak dancer.
I was gonna say, you sound like you're talking dance, like traditional. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But so actually, distinct fun memory about that. My first aerial was a New Year's Eve performance for a bunch of gazillionaires, and so high pressure for me, especially because I just wanted to do as good of it as I could and continue to be employed and be friends with everybody. But I felt like I was just screwing it up left and right, and I had no idea what was going on. Things kept getting added to it, so it was almost like I thought I was just doing one thing, and then suddenly I was doing that thing. But the choreography you learned was only a fraction of it. It turns out there's times more to just that one act. And then there's going to be these other 2 acts, and I was just like drowning. And I remember at that exact time, Wayne Static from Static X passed away. And when I was an angsty teenager, I used to listen to Static X on the way to middle school every day and just be like this music. So I started listening to Static X after. I mean, I never take music and just be like, no, that was what I liked when I was younger. Anything like I continue to like. I don't like music because it's a fad or because I'm told you're supposed to like this right now. So I revisit Static X's catalog, and I distinctly remember also starting to get the flu during this rehearsal process, which did not help. Getting called with maybe a 20-minute warning to rehearsals. So I would just be sitting in bed and it was like, you need to be at the gym in 20 minutes. I'd be like, oh, kill me, Dale. and I'd go. And so I started listening to All in Wait by Static X in particular, since the lyrics are drowning myself over and over, living to die, and so on and so forth. So that was kind of my mental state at the time, and as sad as that might sound. And so ever since then, Static X All in Wait has been my "you're going to rehearsal for the first time for a new gig" playlist. And there's no longer that negative connotation with it. Now I'm just like, this is sort of my cool.
But it helped you. I mean, this is a good thing to kind of talk about, because I think the lesson to learn from that is that the state you're in, I mean, the music, even though it matched your state, it also probably helped pull you out of it a little bit, because it was a way for you to, to even though they're not there with you, the music's there with you, and that's kind of a way for it to kind of to share your feelings, and how you're feeling about something and your emotional state. So that's, sometimes people are like, well, listen to something positive if you're feeling negative. And I'm just like, well, no, listen to something that's like really matches your state. And that can kind of allow you to feel like, okay, it's okay to feel this way right now. And now you kind of amplify that emotion, then it kind of has a chance to pull away from you. And I think that as athletes, movers, whatever like that, that's a really important thing to kind of take away from that particular experience you were talking about. Just, I don't know, do you have any other further thoughts on that particular thing, as far as like matching your state to kind of pull you out of because you have to be in a certain state to perform eventually. And sometimes once you get on stage, everything just flips and you're fine,
Yeah.
But
well, you first.
No, but I think also as someone that's kind of when someone's coming up into it, they haven't developed those coping skills yet. And so I don't know, I drew that from what you were saying. Like you used to listen to it then, you still listen to it now, because now it probably is uplifting in a certain way because it helped you get through that. So.
Oh, absolutely. And there was another part of that cycle was what came before, because also when I was learning to do flips in my living room, I just would take all the couch cushions off and put them on the ground and just try to backflip and stuff like that. I didn't have coaching. And I would always blast Rammstein and Static X and industrial metal like that to kind of pump myself up. Because as a 12, you watch action movies, like, I'm Jet Li, and you go and run around like a crazy person. So that was kind of my way of hyping myself up. So it was one of the bitter things to revisit when he passed away. But also with regards to music, I remember kind of a sort of, but a funny thing. So I've worked in 3 Cirque du Soleil shows, plus some other one-off productions that they made. So I worked in Criss Angel, and then Beatles Love, and then Run. And I remember when Run, because Run the same theater as Criss Angel originally was. And so I remember when they were playing the music from Love at Run, and I was walking downstairs where I used to walk to get ready for Criss Angel, and I just had this weird, like, oh God, what show am I in? What costume am I supposed to be in right now? Like, I'm supposed to be in the grid, about to drop in, forget that. Like, what's going on? This is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Where I hear Beatles songs, I'm just like, oh, I'm late.
Yeah, nothing's more disruptive. I found that happen with, like because a lot of times when I end up I do a lot of corporate gigs. I did a lot of corporate gigs. Right now we can kind of go into this other tangent in a second regarding the current situation of entertainment at the moment. But no, what I remember, like if I had done a choreography of any type, because I used to be in a dance company a long time ago called Nebellin, which was like a street style dance company, like one of the first of its kind in Arizona. So, but I remember like anytime I'd hear music from that or something I did in college, and I was doing another show, it's kind of like this alternate reality of you're like, I am that person too. But now I have to be this person. But they're like, it's almost as if you're drifting in and out of that reality, and you're 2 people at that moment. It's very, very odd and almost disturbing. And you're like, it's like, and it makes you second guess. Yeah, you're like second guessing this stuff the whole time, and it's really hard to break out of that. But that isn't it very, as I think that might only happen with performers, because of that.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's the same.
Or some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, that kind of same, kind of like that almost.
I was just thinking it's kind of like when you catch something that's familiar, like maybe someone smells like some perfume and they're just like, oh, I'm taken back to this memory or something like that. But in this case, you're actively kind of living an alternate version of that memory. It's like, oh, what am I doing? For me, that always happened when choreography changed and the music was still the same. And if you took a hiatus from it for whatever reason, or injured out of show, or just something changes, but it's still very similar, that would always be very confusing. Yeah. And I always get ready for everything way, way, way too early. So if I have to be on stage in 15 minutes, I'm already in costume. I'm already standing spot, just like, let's go. Because I don't like to feel rushed, and I don't like to feel that panic of like, oh God, everything's going wrong, even if it's not going wrong. So in those situations, if things changed, there have been times where I've realized, oh, I am actually in the wrong spot right now. I need to go. Yeah.
Do you think that this goes more toward specific athletes? I guess this probably is more individual than anything. But I've met people that can wake up and do whatever they do the best right after waking up. And I've met people that take a long time to warm up. And I don't know if that's just the way you've built your psyche, or if it's actually like the way your body is built. Like I know that if I'm going to do any kind of tumbling, because usually I rarely get a chance to do it on soft ground. I always have to do it on hard ground or something. That it's like, I really, well, first of all, I'd like earlier in the day to have done a few of those things, at least, so I can remind myself that I can do them. Because somehow, no matter how many times I've done a backflip, if I just do one before a performance, it always makes me feel better about the performance, no matter thousands of times that I've done it before. And then the other part is just like, I'm kind of a thicker person, and I have to get deeper into my tissues of my body to be able to do this kind of stuff and get warmed up in that area. And I wonder if that's just something you inherently know, so you always want to prep early because of it, or if it's a personal thing. I don't know.
I think it's mostly a personal thing. I was actually writing an article that I was going to turn into a vlog without being like, hey fam, it's lit, but some form of video blog about exactly that. I don't whatsoever. I might warm up my joints a little bit first if I have to do something that's going to require any flexibility, but ultimately I don't. And it's a deliberate thing, because I used to drive about an hour and a half just to get to the gym. Gym would be 2.5, 3 hours, and then I would drive an hour and a half to get home. So I would spend more time driving than I would training, and I didn't want to waste any of the time I had there to train warming up. So like, I'm not saying just go in and be like, oh, I'm going to try a Miller. I haven't even done a wheel today. But like, I remember distinctly, I would always try and raise what my starting point was, and okay, this is an acceptable first trick of the day. I know I can do this with no warm up. Yeah. And when it got to the point of doing a double back on floor with no warm up, I was like, hey, great. For the rest of life, I know that I can just do a double back. I don't have to go through like, okay, back tuck, back pike, back straight, back full, back double full, blah, blah, blah. And now, as a means of trying to take tricks out of this, or off of this pedestal of fear or intimidation, especially new tricks, ones that I neglected. If I do something new, I try and do it a few times, quit before I start to flounder with it, and then next day try to start either with that trick or as close as possible to that trick. So for example, the last trick of the 2010s learned was a full out, so triple front with a full on the last flip. And I learned it on December 29th, I think. So then December 5th, I went, and the first thing I tried for the day, I did a triple front with a half out, no warm up at all, and was like, okay, good. And then tried to quarter twist, and then tried to do the full thing, because I didn't want to take that trick, especially knowing that I was going to lose a couple days of training in the New Year's Eve weekend. I didn't want to have that trick stay on that pedestal of fear. I wanted to know that I know how to do that trick. And on another note, as a performer, you don't typically get to warm up because there is no equipment to warm up on. So yeah, when I was at Love, never once warmed up trampoline because there was neither the equipment nor the time. I would be doing this act, then I would be doing this cue, then I would be changing, and then it was go time. So you have to know that the skills that you're doing, especially in that case where you're doing it 10 times a week in front of an audience plus rehearsal, are going to be safe and consistent. And yeah, you just have to be able to know. Like I would always watch, at the risk of making all the teeterboard crew at the gym hate me, I would always watch teeter rehearsals or teeterboard classes. And when it was more free form and people were just kind of working on their own things, I would see so much tendency in what they were doing. It was like, oh, I have to make sure I can still do a backflip before I try a back pike. Okay, well, now that I can do a back pike, I have to make sure I go back lay. And I just sit there and be like, you've done these tricks for over a decade. It might not be on teeterboard, and it is very different being on teeterboard for sure. The body knew how to do a backflip of any sort under any condition. If you were drunk and I put a gun to your head, you would be able to do a backflip. So it's not like, I feel like ultimately it comes a form of ritualized procrastination where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this uncomfortable thing. This is my routine. And the way that I found that helps a lot with that is just to do a variation on something you're already doing. So let's say you're doing a regular backflip. Well, now instead of kicking up to straight, tracking out to split. Great. It's already different. You're making your brain work slightly differently. You're moving yourself in a good direction. But if you just do the same thing over and over and over and over, it's like you can't expect to change from just doing the exact same thing over and over, especially if you have a finite amount of time. You're wasting it when you're just doing that. Because let's say you're a really good trampolinist or a really good tricker. You're not going to forget how to do a hook kick overnight. Like, should you warm up your hook kicks? Yeah, why not? But you're not going to just be like, I started and I forgot and now my ankle's broken. Like, you know what you're doing. So, yeah.
That's great. That was a great way to explain all that, because I think a lot of that has to go is very much related to the fear cycle and fear related to pain. And so this is all I don't know if you've looked up Z Health stuff at all. So they're pretty much in this field that's entirely related to how the body receives pain or perceives pain, and it's 100% figment of your imagination that you're developing that where you're feeling it. Now I'm not saying people don't actually feel pain; they do. I'm saying that you decide how to interpret it, right? And I think that can also happen with any kind of movement-based thing, acrobatic and anything like that, is that, like you said, the gun to your head, you could do it, right? Because you're not thinking about, how do I set and do this? How do I set? And when do I pull my tilt? Or my feet pointed? It's like, no, you do it the best way you can do it. And there's times when that works. And then I've also noticed that, like, with me in particular, is like, okay, I'll do a skill 3 or 4 times. I should leave it at that. I'm not going to try and do, maybe if I'm trying to push a 10 rep or a 20 rep just for the heck of it or something, okay, sure. But as far as knowing I have that skill, 2 times, 1 time, I'm like, okay, it feels good, move on. Or like the variation, like you said before, it's like, you're not going to forget how to do that, and you can get more for your time by adding these other things. Like, because I know, like, for the longest time, I was like, okay, I want to work cartwheels today. Well, that means I got to do rebound backs, I got to do rebound Arabian, I got to do rebound flash, I got to do all this stuff, and I get to do all those skills along the way. Then I do my full, but it's like, well, let's just start with a round off full. Let's just do a cart full instead, and just start that first, because then it goes back to kind of the warm up thing. Is like your warm up. And this is what my dance teacher used to tell me as far as flexibility goes. He's like, the only thing that's stopping you from flexibility is your mind. Your body can get there. If you were knocked out, I could put you in all kinds of weird positions. You wouldn't be fighting me about it. It's just your mind about it, right? And so that also goes with anything I think involving this. If you think that you need to be warmed up to do a round off double back, then when you go do it, your body's going to be in this fear mode. You didn't warm up, you can't do a double back. So by kind of reminding yourself that you have this threshold of things you can do, you know, in that position, you're kind of amplifying where you start at. And it does, I think anybody can really get to that level, you know, but you have to train yourself. You have to convince yourself that that is the case. You know, you can't like go and I have a lot of respect for Daniel LeBlanc, but you can't just go and say like, I choose not to be afraid of my backflip, you know, and then, you know, the first time it's going to happen, you got to work toward it in slow increments and build up to it. And I think he would actually believe that too. But I think that was a really great way of explaining that, I think, for people, is about like, how do you go there? I think it's also important to respect, though, that you need to build up that light threshold. Like, okay, I'm here. Okay, now I can go here. You can't go all the way up to here and expect yourself to be able to do that hardest thing every single time from the very beginning. But I've always wondered about that.
Think of it as like, if let's say you're a child and without even knowing it, you learn to speak your native language, you learn to stand, you learn to walk, learn to jump and crawl and all these things. And to me, any skill you can learn acrobatically is a similar skill to that. Also, I'm going to totally run to the bathroom again after this. I drink a lot of water. But it's not like you wake up as a 4-year-old. You have to be like, okay, do I remember how to sit up? Okay, check that one off the box. Okay, do my legs still work? Oh, they do. Okay, I can stand up. Take a stand up. Oh, okay, that worked as well. Like, so I feel that when it comes to acrobatics and things like that, after you've done thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions over the year, like, I can wake up and do a one-arm handstand. I can wake up and juggle 5 balls. I can wake up and go to the gym and do a full, and I don't have to think about any of things. But that was not always the case. I had to build up to that. And I think of it as almost, I kind of envision it as kind of how you were doing this. I envision a staircase, and I like to start on as high of a step as I possibly can so that it's less time and effort to get to the next step. But if you're starting down at the bottom of the staircase every single day and every single session with every aspect of everything you've ever done, it's just like, how do you expect to get anywhere? It's like start hike base camp every single time instead of camping along the way and then continuing. You're just never going to get to the finish line. Not that the finish line
I was going to say,
just one of those never-ending things.
The finish line is always farther away, but you can always be closer to that infinite finish line than you would at the beginning. So
exactly.
Why don't you go ahead and take that second pit stop, and then when you come back, we can talk about how the entertainment industry has been kind of muffed up by this whole thing. So,
sure. Also, just a side note that you might ask later, or you might not, but I figured it would be worth covering, is from tricking. My tricking level basically plateaued in around 2005. And so I started trying other things, mostly dumped into a pit at the time. But eventually I started training with friends in Vegas a lot around 2010. And I realized there were so many people from Cirque du Soleil who were essentially gods in my mind. And they all did all these different things that I had never even thought of trying, like aerial strips or hand balancing or tramp wall in particular. And so because I don't really care what I'm doing so much as I'm learning something and growing, I started trying all these other things because I wasn't getting any better at tricking. Like the tricking standard eclipsed whatever I was capable of at the time. And in order to not just feel like, oh, I'm just useless, and to keep getting that little junky grip of I'm making progress, I started trying all these other disciplines. And that was how I wound up doing all this generalist stuff. And then the only lessons I ever took were trampolining lessons, purely so that when I went to audition, I wouldn't look like an amateur against all these people who were real trampolinists. And so that was mostly just to work on my form and my technique, because you see clearly who has been coached and who hasn't when you watch the way people spot the trampoline bed, their technique, what they do with their arms. you see a lot of funny kind of counter bounces. Like I've seen people who, instead of as they go up, they raise their arms and bring them down, they do the opposite. So it's like they start with their arms up in the trampoline, and as they go up, they bring them down and then come back up. Kind of like if you were trying to jump to a basketball who like actually do everything wrong. So I don't know. I realized that if I wanted to be a professional performer and I would be competing against Olympic trampolinists for work, obviously they will always be the better trampolinist. I could do what I could to approximate what they were doing and make it look at least believable or sellable that I knew what I was doing to win as well. Yeah.
Well, then before we go into this other part, is there anything in particular that, like, and again, I can edit anything you want out of this, but is there like anything that you feel is really misunderstood in the people that want to get involved with this professionally, from the road that you've taken, the experience you've had? Is there anything that's like you feel you need to kind of bring to light to people if they really want to take this stuff in any sort of seriousness, or do you think they just have to kind of go along with it and see what it's like before they actually do that?
Yeah, a bunch. That's another article I'm going to put out too. But I feel like one big fault of performing, especially on long-term contracts, is that your skills will plateau to an extent because you have to keep your body safe and healthy for performing, because performing becomes your paycheck. So you can't just go into the gym and be like, I'm going to just try this crazy thing. Yeah, you very much have to nerf your own pursuit of new skills in that sense. And everyone thinks they're be different about this. They're like, oh no, those people are just lazy. They don't train as hard as I do. Wrong. You either are too physically exhausted because a full-time job is basically the crux of it. So I think people go and they're like, oh, okay, well, I go and I sit in a cubicle from 9 to 5 and I have to be there earlier. I have to leave for work at this time. Then I have to go home. I have to feed my kids. I have to get to bed in time to wake up and repeat. But it performs. You have to be at work by, usually if you're doing a resident show, you do 2 shows a night and they're at 7:30. So the show is an hour and a half. You finish work at 11 p.m. Then you have to get out of makeup. You might choose to shower at work. You might choose to wait till you go. You have to get back to your car. If you're wearing a wig prep, you have to get your wig and your wig prep off. Basically, you're not going to get home until about night, at which point you eat dinner and then you wind down. So most performers are on sort of a daily life schedule of wake up noonish and go to bed 3 a.m.-ish. But then if you have a family and you have kids, well, the fact that you're on schedule doesn't mean anything, because you still also have to be a parent. You still have to take them to school and do all these things. And you will lose touch with pretty much all your friends who are not on a similar schedule, purely because when you're awake, they're asleep, and vice versa. If you're rehearsing in typically by 4, but more often more like 3 o'clock. So if you think about it, till 11 is a full work day, and it's not just a full work day of just sitting, it's a full work day of training, doing makeup, all these things that do actually take quite a lot out of you. Like, I'm not saying doing makeup is the most physically exhausting thing in the world, but in some shows, you doing your makeup for well over an hour. In other shows, it might take 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you did Toru, the Avatar Cirque du Soleil show. That's
Were
a
you-
lot
were
of
you-
makeup.
were
That's
you-
a hefty makeup scheme.
Yeah.
You're going to be sitting in that chair for 2 hours at least when you start. And even if you were to skip steps or something like that, you would still be sitting there for a very long time. So that is a big chunk of time. Also, I ran into a lot was, let's say I get called to rehearsal at the Vegas Strip for 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And my next, let's say a 30-minute rehearsal, because that could be the case. So 3 p.m. to 3:30. But by the time I would drive home and get settled, it would be about 45 minutes before I had to leave and go back to work again. So it was almost more of a hassle to leave. But then if you don't leave, you're just sitting there like, okay, oh, I got like 2 hours to do nothing. And you don't want to go too crazy with training because it might be the start of your work week and you still have 2 shows to do that night at least. So I think that people should realize that it is a full-time commitment. It's not just I'm going to relay with the skits, I am now the greatest showman kind of thing. It's a job. So, yeah. Another big misconception that people have is that they think they should do their craziest tricks. Wrong. No, absolutely not. What you're looking for in a show is safety and consistency. It should be an impressive trick because no one's going to pay to come watch you juggle balls, but it should still be something that's not going to endanger the audience, you, or your castmates. And if you show an audition and you're just like, you know what, quintuple back time, you're not going to get hired. Someone who does a good looking double back will get hired because they will look like they're in control and they're safe and they're hireable. Whereas if you just show up looking like you're a maniac who wants to do something, they don't need that. And you also become an insurance liability as well, because let's say you show up and then you break yourself or someone else as well. Well, now you've not only screwed up a lot, you've cost them a lot of money because now they're going to have to pay for you and maybe that person, and they're going to have to spend even more money finding more people to replace you and whoever else you hurt. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people see and they're like, I could do that. And it's like, yeah, maybe you could, but could you do it that many times when you're exhausted, when you've like gone through real problems? Like performers have arguments, performers have fights, performers don't get sleep, performers have the same life issues that literally anybody else, and they still have to go out and do all the crazy flips and be safe about it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I used to have a talk at the beginning of our free running comps at the gym I used to work at, and I had to talk to the young men and say, look, guys, I want you to do your best stuff out there, and I want you to feel good about what you did, but I also want you guys to be, if you don't make it, to be able to come to the next one, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was like this idea that, like, you know, do the things you know you can do. This isn't the first time this has ever been aired or seen, you know. If you have something that you're unsure about, you know, then it's probably not the best time to do it when you're under stress like you are right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was like this thing, and then my friend Jackie, Natapong Jackio, we used to say, you do your 70% skill at 100% effort, you know, or like, that's what I feel like. It takes 70% of your effort your 100% skill would be your hardest skill you could do, okay, at all, one time, right? And then the 70% one would be one you could probably do 10 times just fine, but then you're going to, because of your performance ability, you're going to perform that at 100% performance, but you're going to use your 70% difficulty. So that's, and I think that you often see that, like, at
yeah. You could even say, like, let's say you're doing weightlifting, and if you're at like a strongman competition or a lifting competition or something like that, you're only going to do the lift once. You're going to have your 3 attempts or whatever, but that's a very different format, doing 1 rep max full out crazily once versus doing 10 times that week every week. You couldn't do a 1 rep max that many times. It wouldn't be your 1 rep max, essentially, if that was how easy it was to, well, not easy it was, that was a doable thing, you know? It would be very taxing on your body and your mental health, your nervous system. So yeah, I think that the 70% skill, 100% intensity or control would be a very, very good way of putting it, because yeah, it is, you're going to do. And also it's worth keeping in mind that when you're doing shows, there are different formats, but some of them you don't do a whole lot at all. And some you do non-stop work. And even if that work is not physically arduous, it's still, you're doing something. You're not just chilling backstage, typing on your laptop. So, yeah.
Okay, so you said you will plateau performing will have to stop you for a while. And you're going to be living a life of 12 noon to 3 a.m. usually. And then you also said you can't do your craziest tricks. I'll elaborate on these a little bit because I'm going to write up some bullet points so people can kind of follow along the video a little bit better. What's another? Do you have anything else you want to say about it? Without taking too much away from your amazing article you're going to put out for the world to see.
Yeah, it all complements things. But I think a lot of people, myself included, want to get into Cirque du Soleil in particular because of the name brand recognition of. And I think that is a terrible reason to do anything, but still a reason that people practically do things, myself included, because when people find out, oh, you are an acrobat, they're like, oh, you're an acrobat? Have you ever heard of Cirque du Soleil? And you're like, yes, I've heard of Cirque du Soleil. And they're like, oh, have you thought of auditioning? Like, yes, I thought of auditioning. They're like, oh, have you auditioned? Yes, I have auditioned. Oh, do you work for them? No, I don't work for them. Oh, so you weren't good enough. And that's kind of the equivalent of being like, oh, went to college. Was it Harvard? No? Then you're an idiot, huh? Or, oh, you work with computers? Oh my God, did you program for Google? No. Oh, you must be a terrible programmer. Like, that's just the only known name for the general populace. And don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic place to work, and I'm very grateful for all the work I've done with them, but it doesn't mean it's the end all be all of performance. I've seen Franco Dragon's shows are crazy hard, like insanely hard, like House of Dancing Water, Lorette, Hange, La Pearl. All those look super demanding. They're not Cirque du Soleil shows. Like, hats off to those guys. There's the Spiegel World shows in Lucas, Opium, Absinthe, and Atomic Saloon. Those are a very different format as well. Those are specialist shows. The Dragon ones are general shows. A Dragon show, you would be going just nonstop from start to finish, and you might not be doing a lot of acts, although you probably are. I've never worked them, but you will be worked nonstop. With Cirque du Soleil, it could be one or the other. It depends if you're doing a specialty act, if you're a character, if you're house troupe, what you're doing. But with the Spiegel World shows, it seems to mostly be you do 1-2 acts and you do a few cues on stage where maybe you walk through a scene as part of the exposition that sets up the next act or something like that. So those are all different. And then also if you're doing corporate gigs, that's a completely different ball game because your work is sporadic. It's more like doing work where you're going to do maybe a few days of rehearsal, then this gig that pays you what you would make in a week of shows elsewhere. But then there are at times few and far between and at times nonstop. But there's different calibers to them, different pace to them, different amounts of output for them. And a lot of people undercut the market a little bit by going and taking a few silks or something and then being like, I'm an aerialist, I'll do it for $35. And you're like, no, don't do that. Wrong. And there's also different circus communities within different places. Like Las Vegas has a thriving corporate gig industry, or at least it did pre-coronavirus, because a lot of companies hold their corporate conferences here. LA has a good amount of corporate gigs as well. But if we're in Wichita or somewhere, I can't imagine that there's a nonstop thriving demand for sear wheel performances for corporate conferences.
What I found with that is that they want something to entertain people. They don't know what they want. And so the hardest part here is convincing them that they want you, because no matter what, if you go there and do a performance, they're going to think it's amazing. It's like
Yeah.
the expectation of the layman of what performance is, like, you know, like they could watch a YouTube video of something and say, oh, that's amazing. But then they see you in person, that person could be 5-6 levels below that person. It's still amazing because it's in person, it amplifies it. So they don't know what they want usually when they ask you for stuff. And it's about steering them toward that. And, you know, obviously my wife and I, we have our own company and we work with some other companies out here. But our constant battle is just trying to get the person to ask these questions, and for the person to say what they're actually looking for is the hardest part. It's like it's this weird game you have to do with them to get them to say, oh yeah, this is what we're looking for. But usually you could throw anything at them that is the person's been training at for a while, and they'll be really happy with it. You know, and so, yeah, I can see what you mean. It's like, I think if someone goes to Vegas or LA, they kind of know what they want in their performance because they're around it all the time. Out here where the art scene's a lot less, it's like, well, this is what we're looking for. And it's like, you send them like, that's perfect. And I can send them anything like, that's perfect, you know?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, the hardest part is just, I think there were more than enough corporate gigs in Arizona specifically, or in a lot of places that happen. It's just, you got to get to them, you know, to let them know, like, this is, hey, you put this in and people will love it. And
actually, that's a good point I should cover. A lot of people say they want to be performers, or they want to be in circ, or they want to do this, or they want to do that, but they never actually take any steps towards that besides just training in their backyard or something like that. And I always compare it to, let's say you were the most virtuoso guitar player ever. It doesn't matter if you're the virtuoso guitar player ever and nobody sees you play. It doesn't matter if you're living in Barrow, Alaska, and you're just playing to the ice. Like, no one is going to just find you spontaneously. You have to be proactive about it, and you have to understand that networking is important in any industry, but especially in the entertainment arts. Like, if you don't know the people who are going to hire you, how are you going to get hired?
Yeah.
One is going to just anonymously send out surveys hoping that someone will respond to be like, yes, I'm the one you need. Like, no, you need to be out there auditioning. You need to be out with people. You need to be promoting yourself. And I don't mean in like a narcissistic way, but you do need to have some form of material that people can go and look at. So something that people ask on a very regular basis is, how do I get into circ? There's a lot of different factors that contribute to that, but almost universally, these people haven't gone on the Cirque du Soleil casting website and just made a file. And like, start there. I mean, it's an application, and it will walk you through exactly what they're looking for in various disciplines. Beyond that, being in the right place would help. I mean, there are no Cirque du Soleil shows currently performing in Sri Lanka. So if you're in Sri Lanka and you want to be in Cirque, you should probably go to Montreal or Vegas. Because, again, being great at what you do, but far away from it isn't going to help much. And if you were, in my experience, if you're in a place and you know the people and they know your skill set and you're likable and you're easy to work with, you've already increased your odds of getting any job. And like, it doesn't have to be circ. It doesn't even have to be acrobatics. It could be, I don't know, engineering pipes or something like that. If you're a dick, no one wants to work with you. If you know what you're doing, no one wants to work with you. And if you are far, far away and it's going to cost them thousands of dollars to import you to manufacture pipes, but they could go with a guy who's right next to them, then why would they go with you? So
you have to be in like the top 1% for them to care in that kind of sense.
Exactly.
And not,
in an industry, you are competing against Olympic athletes, so they are in the top 1% and you probably aren't. So you better be in the right place and time.
Yeah. If there's anything inside there that I was trying to pull out of that, but I think that was pretty well said as far as that goes, and I'll go back and listen to everything.
Okay.
Anything else you'd like to say about that? So far you just said CDS is not the end. There's other things. put yourself out there, network. That was the last thing we just talked about. And then anything else that want to come to your mind before we switch over?
Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
And especially don't be a dick internet. No one wants to hear your political or religious beliefs. They don't care. And if you're trying to get into performing, you have to come to terms with the fact that regardless of what your belief system is, you are performing in a liberal arts industry, and you're going to be working gay people, you're going to be working with atheists, you're going to be working with minorities. And if you can't handle that, you should not be in this industry. Like, deal with it. The industry's not going to change just because you're super like, no, but you guys are all sinners. Like, no, fuck off. They care. Go do your thing. There are plenty of other people who will be easy to work with here. So, and I can't believe I even have to say this, especially in 20, but if there's anything that my Facebook feed has taught me, especially in the wake of coronavirus, it's there are a lot of extremely close-minded people there who are doing a fantastic job of making sure they never get hired.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I went on a little Facebook fast about 3 weeks ago, maybe. I was like, I'm done with this feed. And and then I went back on it, like, because I moved it out of the easily accessible part of my phone. I still have to use it for networking. So, and then like I remember going on it, and then like I just slightly looked down, and then it's like, oh, this is the same thing that's been posted like 2 weeks ago, and it's with the same. Oh, okay, get back out. And so I did my post and left. But but it's like, so let's go ahead and transfer over then, because I think this is a good place to segue. So what this so going on with that, like you said, it's like the thing that made me the most upset about this is I know people have more depth than they're showing right now, but people are so frustrated and they're getting some kind of confirmation from this frustration, so they're following it in some sort of way. But I've seen some people just, say some things, and in person, I can talk to this person, I can have them clarify. It's really,
for sure.
And that's why I like these long format things. So if I get something wrong or whatever, we can talk about it, in particular. But yeah, when it comes to just like a post like that, and I know in general, because of my background, it's like I was really horrible with forums. I was really horrible with understanding, like, when someone says something, first of all, taking it with a grain of salt and realize that the person's saying it from a place of comfort. They're not saying it from a place of like being in front of someone and having to deal with a human being right in front of you. Those are very different situations, and you have to kind of take your emotion out of it when you're doing stuff involving like text sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I just, since this whole thing started, it's been kind of like, I know these people have more depth. What's frustrating to me is seeing that these people are only showing one small part of what they are as a human being, instead of showing this broad scale of what's available to them to show. And I don't feel like I've changed that much during this whole situation, but that's because prior to this, I was already kind of reclusive. So it hasn't changed much about the way I view and everything. It's just the fact that I know everyone around me, or everyone else around me is changing. And they're staying in a very fearful, kind of contracted area. Which can be, I'm not saying it's not okay to be afraid. It's not okay to have some sort of panic, because that's a good thing sometimes. It can make you sometimes make the right choice for you and your family or whatever. But I am saying that people are not moving past, they're not assessing the situation and seeing, okay, what is it I have to be now? Okay, what is it I have to be now as we grow? It's just staying in one spot. All right, so let's transfer into how has this thing destroyed the Vegas scene?
Pretty successfully. With in particular, it's not even necessarily a matter of performing, but like Nevada has 3 main cities: Vegas, Reno, and Carson City, which is the capital. Carson City, as far as I can tell, is basically a suburb of Reno. I've driven through it, and I couldn't tell where one Canada did, but I was also driving to an airport and not really paying much attention. But Reno is similar to Vegas. Reno is also a place with hotel casinos, and hotels and casinos primarily thrive on tourists. So with there being no traveling happening right now, with there being no crowds of people anywhere, I mean, even if Vegas were completely open for business right now, who's going to be there? So with the shows drive tourists into the casinos. They drive them into restaurants, nightclubs, whatever afterwards. So they are a thing that the hotel industry are a big fan of. Um, but yeah, right now there's just nothing going on, and there's no corporate conferences going on. So there's corporate bigger, and the industry that I worry the most for is actually musicians on a smaller scale, because imagine you're a touring musician and you make the majority of your income from touring and selling merch on those tours, like, and you're performing to clubs of, let's say, 200 to 500 people a night. Like, that's not like, okay, you're selling out arenas by means, but you are still making a decent living at that. But right now, how are you going to do that? Because there are no small clubs. Small clubs also mean people will apparently be closer together than an arena where you could theoretically be like, okay, 1 seat, 2 seat gap, 1 seat, 2 seat gap. I don't know if that model would be financially viable either. I know that there's a certain threshold of seating that has to be filled to make shows, depending on what those tickets priced at, and depending how the show, how much money it costs to operate the show. Basically a long-winded way of saying, I don't know if you would make money as a performer, even if you were performing to the Staples Center, if there were only 30% of people filling this. I don't know what it costs to rent an arena, but I imagine it's not cheap. So, yeah. But with regards to here, I mean, no one knows what's going on right now. I know that as of yesterday, Guy Laliberté said that he is going to attempt to bid to buy Cirque du Soleil back, or buy a stake in it back, because he had sold his last 10% in the company last February, and he had sold the majority of it in 2015 to groups. So here's to hoping. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I don't know the details of it, and I'm not an economist to pretend to be. But I do know that with regards to the shows here, even if things were to go completely astray, and even if Cirque were to close as a company itself, I believe that the corporate, I believe the corporations that are casinos, particularly MGM, would probably try and strike some kind of deal, because with Le Rêve, which is a show at the Wynn, was originally created by Franco Dragone, but Wynn bought the rights to the show after a few years, and so now it's entirely owned in-house. It's a Wynn production point, and I imagine something similar could happen with the shows here, whether it be any company. I'm not saying Cirque in particular, but they associated with entertainment. So I think that that would be a strange decision to not try and buy the rights to the shows if they're available. I also think that things are going to move towards VR more and more over the next decade. I know that with the camera, things like the Oculus, there's a greater and greater potential for that. And I think that that will probably be the format that we're going to start seeing a lot of things that we previously saw as live entertainment. But it just means that those technologies will have to become more accessible or proliferated in the mainstream, instead of it being for just people who play video games or just people who are really into the tech industry. I think that would happen. I mean, look at the Wii or the Kinect or things like that. Like, the idea of having motion capture for a game was inconceivable in the 90s, and then it became kind of the standard for a while. So I totally have to go to the bathroom. I drink a lot of water.
All right, go ahead. All right. Yeah, we're pretty close to wrapping this up. So, yeah, but okay. So you kind of left off with the fact that you're you don't, the VR, okay, talking about VR and also talking about how motion capture wasn't conceivable, but now it's something that's like in the 90s, but now it's something that's seen more and more. So you really
Mhm.
think that this might do you think that this situation is gonna push that agenda forward?
Quite possibly. If I was a VR company, I'd be working my balls off right now to try and make sure that happened.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that that's a sort of inevitable thing
Hmm.
with the way that technology is going.
Hmm.
And I think Black Mirror had like a choose your own adventure style episode or something like that. I feel like that's kind of where things are going. I feel that logic that is the logical, not conclusion, but progression of things. And I think that right now, with everyone having to be distant from one another and movie theaters being closed and basically people having to spend more time at home, I think this would be a logical time for that transition to start getting by those companies. Because I mean, even think like drones are so commonplace now, but
Hmm.
drones were not at all a commonplace household way of filming things. I were always just, oh, I wish I had a crane so I could get this cool shot from above, or oh, I wish someone was in a helicopter. And now you can just go and buy like a DJI
Hmm.
Phantom, or even the GoPro drone. I don't know if that exists anymore. I feel like it doesn't. But the fact that all these companies were just so quick to jump on drone wagon. I remember doing a video shoot at the Universal backlot years ago for a promo for RIP Ryan Reynolds movie. It was a Devon Supertramp video,
Hmm.
and he had this big crazy drone with all these cameras on it. It's like, what the hell is that helicopter thing? And then now it's just like you see people flying their drone around the neighborhood. You see it all the time. You go to the beach and someone doing some big flyby and things like that. So I remember the first time I ever looked through a VR headset and I was blown away. And I remember a castmate of mine showing me what things could look like in a performance setting with VR. And it was super cool because you just get like a different perspective of things. You can just kind of like look around and see what's happening in any given stage. And I feel like when you go and you see a show that's on a very high budget and a very high level of theatrics, and possibly take it all in one viewing.
Yep,
Um,
that's the way to do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
But yeah, and that's what I love about that is I could go back to a show several times, and but then of course you're spending the money for that, and even in VR you could walk onto the set and be there and see it from different angles, and that's something that's kind of
exactly.
that doesn't allow. But yeah, that's interesting. But I wonder how much of the human element. I don't know. I wonder how much of it's going to be a novelty thing for a while, and then it'll kind of
Mm,
wear off, and then the other part of it will be, oh, I still want to see humans risking their life to do something.
quite possibly.
Yeah.
I
So.
think so. The human element is a good point. I've noticed that whenever I have friends who come to Vegas and they want to get like the whole Cirque experience, if possible, and sometimes it is possible, some shows have this, I try and get them to go for a backstage tour and I try and get them to rehearse because I feel like that really, really humanizes the whole thing. Because when you see people dressed as like a lizard on stage doing backflips, you're just like, oh, well, the man can do this. Of course he can. But when you see people in shorts and a t-shirt talking in between things and be like, okay, I'm going to go try this now. And there's like something there with that. And you get to see like, oh, this is still difficult. This is still scary. These are things that human beings are doing. It's not just like a full game on review. You're actually close enough to see and hear what's actually going on. It's a very different experience.
It's just another kind of experience for people to have with it, but
Oh, for sure.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, it's very, very different to see a perfectly smooth, streamlined act happen, but it's a very different thing to see the process that goes into that, whether it's the creation process or even just the rehearsal process or creating somebody new into the act. Like some trampoline acts have over 10 people in them, Well, that's a lot of people using few pieces of equipment. There has to be clear communication between those people. You have to know where that person's going to go so you're not in the way or going to the same place. And I feel like that is lost in the same sense as when you watch a concert and people are just playing and it just is perfect. This is when you the actual process of someone learning those pieces or rehearsing those pieces. And you might also get sort of a different flavor of it watching that rehearsal. They might be trying something different that day. I remember, even as a silly example, seeing a Linkin Park rehearsal video where they're doing Holding On, which is usually kind of a fragile song, but instead they did it more in the style of hybrid theory. And it was really cool. Things like that. So it's like watching training camps for football teams or something. Like, I feel like people want to get to know the people behind this or the process behind this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So you personally, with if I switch gears again real quick before we finish up, I know last time I saw you, you had hurt your ankle pretty bad, and then recently I know you got the clear to take the boot off, or I don't know if you had the boot on still or whatever. But where are you at currently with that, and how has your motivation still been strong considering this whole situation? What have you been doing personally during this time to keep going? Are you just still being Scott and doing what you've always done because that's what you do, or have things changed for you?
No, I'm still me. But I'm limited in what I can do, both physically and endurance standpoint. I can walk again without a boot and without a brace, but I definitely have limited range of motion and limited mobility with that ankle. And I walk sometimes in a very Frankenstein-y way, but sometimes in a very not so bad way.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I've been extremely busy. I've been writing a lot because kind of those articles I was talking about, I feel like there are a lot of people who want to get into performance or just not perform, but learn new tricks. And I feel that a lot of those people either have misconceptions or they don't necessarily approach it from the most efficient standpoint. So I just kind of want to make a sort of self-help vlog and blog for people who like to watch videos or people who prefer to read. And I don't want to just be talking about my own experiences, but I do know that I've had my fair share of positive and negative experiences, both in terms of training and performing, and especially getting into performing. I mean, I failed in the first round of every audition I did for 4 years before I finally got a job. And that taught me different things about what not to do and what to do, how to prepare for this, how to have a good mindset. And it's actually liberating now when I walk into an audition, because I both know, okay, I've already basically accomplished what I set out to accomplish. There is no pressure of, I hope I'm good. And I also know different sort of ways of giving myself a mental edge of confidence with this, because audition is much more stressful than a performance. I feel like your performance at an audition is scrutinized way more deeply than it would be if you were just incumbent at a show and you'd done it 100 times. Like, yeah, people are watching. No one's going to watch every little detail of everything you do to be like, is this person really who we want? And I feel like a lot of people go into these auditions with various degrees of anxiety, various misconceptions about how hard they should go, kind of like we were talking about here with people who think they should chuck big tricks, or even not big tricks, but tricks that you don't have dialed in. Like, that is the worst time you could possibly try and do that. Mm-hmm. You have to look at it from a perspective of, usually the people who are hiring you have done something similar to your job. So they know they're looking, and it's very clear to anybody if you're trying something that you don't have on lock. And it's very clear when people making small talk. It's very clear when you feel uncomfortable. And I feel that when people do fail these auditions, and frankly, most people do fail an audition, if there's only one spot available and 10 people show up, well, 9 people at minimum do not get the job. But a lot of people are defeated by that, and they don't realize that this is a learning experience and something that you can grow from if you take it that way. Or you could be like, no, it's not for me, and write yourself off and go back to doing whatever you're doing. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that either, but you have to figure out what is it you want. Because a lot of people want to be a performer, but I don't think they realize that it's not just the title of waking up and being like, perform. Like, there is work involved in this. It's not just the skies open up and God reaches down and hands you a golden rose and goes, you made it, you're done. Like, no, now you have to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that a lot of people, and by a lot, I mean 99.99999% of people, do not take their training nearly seriously enough if they're trying to work in a company. But anyway, like, I see people who are wanting to be a lawyer. And if you want to be a lawyer, you go to law school, you put in at least 40 hours a week of class, homework, internships, things like that. And then eventually you become a lawyer and you start trying to pay off your student loans, and eventually you become extremely comfortable. Yeah, people want to learn a language and they're like, I'll do a Rosetta Stone for half an hour, 3 times a week, and I will magically become fluent in Mandarin. No, that's not how that works. You have to actually try. You have to actually put yourself into those shoes and work.
Yeah, so as a teacher, I kind of see a lot. This happen a lot. And I remember one time this one girl came up to me and was like, I want to be in the Olympics. And she's like, I'm going to start with parkour. I'm like, why are you doing parkour if you want to be in the Olympics? Like, it was very,
really right now.
Yeah. So, and then I know they're trying to get that thing set in the way, but and this time, like, this was close to 8 years ago. This person came to me and I was like,
so there's nothing even.
Yeah, there was nothing. And like, this person, I was like, is there something I'm missing? I was more curious, and I needed to see what happened. So I was more curious than anything else. And so eventually that didn't work out with that person. But, or like, we get people that come to our aerial classes with my wife and I, and I usually work with the beginners, just get their strength up and everything. And then let my wife take over from there. But usually with that sense, like, we get people coming in and saying like, well, they get upset because, we might not book them for a performance. And it's like, well, first of all, we need an excess of performances to maybe even think about hiring someone else to put them on a performance or get them. And the second thing is like, you kind of have to show that you're in this for a relationship with us too. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing, right? Is having a relationship with people, because it's like, that's especially when it comes to that personal of something. If you're showing that you're just there just to come in and try to take someone's work away, that's kind of rough. And then there's not a lot of trust there. And the final thing is just like, you've only been here like 2 or 3 times. It's like,
that's totally enough to be a professional.
Yeah. And it's like, I know, like, I don't go into I won't go into an audition or anything like that thinking that, this is it, I'm going to get it right here. If I do, great, but it's more or less, I'm just going there to see what happens, and I am going to go there with the best intent and the best strength that I possibly can. And I'm going to, try to mentally prepare and everything like that. But I go in there with that saying like, okay, well, I don't, because I also don't want to get this ego around it, that it destroys me afterward. Because if I fail, and granted on, I'm like, a lot of times the reason why I feel like I've gotten as far as I can is because I've failed a lot, and I've, learned from it, and I kept on going. Massive knee injury. I learned a lot from it. It took me, a year and a half to get my power back in my lower half of my body to do stuff, and I learned a lot from that experience, and I got a lot of empathy from it. But yeah, I think that, like what you said before, it's just this thought that, I'm going to be an aerialist, like, as you did with your arms. And after 1.5 hours per week of it. And that's people stake their entire life on this kind of stuff, and they work there, and they're working in gyms that don't even have mats. They have wires on a bar, and they're a trapeze artist, and they practically float around the dang thing as if they're, some kind of magnetic force that, does that. And, but they had nothing in there, and they're there every day, 4 hours a day, working their craft. And that's why they get to where they get to go. So yeah, it's definitely a good way to thin out the herd. So.
Oh, for sure. I feel like most people in any industry, or not even industry, I feel most people are neither disciplined nor self-motivated enough to put themselves through the amount of physical, mental, and emotional discomfort that it takes to become truly top tier at anything. And I mean, obviously factors go into these things. Like, you could be the most talented gymnast in the world, but if you're somewhere where there is no gymnastics program, even if you are genetically predisposed to being incredible, if you never try gymnastics, you're not going to become an Olympic gymnast. And if you don't have the environment at home that supports that, or you don't have the financial resources to be able to do that, or you can't take time off of school to a competition or something like that. Like, I mean, there is a reason that most Olympic gymnasts are homeschooled. You have to have enough time to put in work at the gym. The only Olympic gymnast I know personally that I can think of who was not homeschooled at any point was Bob. I believe all the rest had at least some form of homeschooling at some point.
Who was that? Who was that person? Sorry, you cut out.
Barr. He was an American Olympic gymnast in 2008, and I want to say 2004, perhaps. He has a pretty popular skill named after him on P-bars, where you swing, essentially do a Tkachev, and then swing again. So it's a pelvis where you swing and then catch in a straddle L, except instead you straddle around and go back into another swing. Okay. And he also has a named skill on rings, which I want to say it was front lever up to Maltese or something like that. He also worked in Cirque very briefly. He was in the show play, doing all manner of things. But
have you also
super
found
nice guy, super smart guy.
Have you also found that people that come in that are extremely like the 1 percentile of their ability just sometimes don't enjoy performing? Like they like being an athlete and they like competing in athletics or whatever, but then when it comes to performing, like that's the spot they kind of fell short in, as being the performance part of performing versus, or like, the acting part and stuff like that. I think that sometimes definitely has its own tier of people as well. And like, I've seen people that weren't, that definitely weren't the top 1%. They weren't even the 50%, but they were a great actor, and they had a general form of skills, and then I think anybody who like could come in could probably put their skills to shame, but they can't get the audience. They can't get they can't command the stage, and everyone's eyes aren't on them, and like, they can look past all that other stuff. So
for sure, it's just different personalities and skills. Performing and being captivating is a skill in and of itself, and being really good at a backflip doesn't mean that you're really good at telling that backflip to an audience. So, there was something I wanted to do. Yeah, it was somewhere in there. This is not what I was going to say, but I will say that most injuries that happen as a performer or even as an athlete are silly mistakes that could have been easily avoided. I think everyone's like, oh, don't do that crazy flip, you're going to get hurt. It's rarely the flips you hurt on. I feel like you're too focused when you're doing a crazy flip to get potentially hurt. But all my worst injuries have always been incredibly stupid, underwhelming things. I fractured my skull stepping off of a trampoline. I broke my rib double bouncing a friend on the trampoline, and he came down and his rib on my rib. This ankle injury was with a jump full turn. I broke my tooth when I was 16 doing a 360 crescent. Like, it's never been. There's been a couple times where it was a big trick, but generally speaking, it's always been like, oh, I just like was walking down the street, tripped on the. No, oh, I was doing a quadruple backflip and saving kids from a burning orphanage or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's
I
always
hyperextended my knee stepping off a curb, something stupid like that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's stuff like that. So, yeah. Yeah.
Where can people, if they want to know more about you, where can they look? Obviously, looking up your name on Instagram, Scott McDonald on Instagram. You said, do you have a website, Scott McDonald, or what?
No, I don't yet. I'm
Where are
going to
you
be
putting
on
your
WordPress.
articles? WordPress, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be on WordPress, and I'm also going to be on my YouTube. And I've got a couple YouTubes, but the one, I don't even know, to be honest. I'm very computer illiterate. This, like I said, my first Zoom call ever. But my YouTube, with all 117 subscribers, is just my name. Good luck finding that.
Yeah, but wait. Interesting.
That's it.
Considering,
yeah, you get 9,000 subscribers on Instagram, you get 100 on YouTube.
yeah, and I'm sure you could probably start doing some long format stuff that reflects your experience, and
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's a good place where to put that. I might overlay some of your training and stuff into the video, some of the things you've done. And
the YouTube ones there have a lot of stuff for your reference, because I used to put out monthly training videos that were just like, oh, this is all the stuff that I was proud of this month, so it's all over the place. So
okay.
helps.
And then yeah, if even in like Messenger you want to send me anything that like link wise to anywhere, I'll put that in the description of the video. And yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. And thank you for doing this for my first one. Maybe we'll do a follow-up one in a few months or something and see where things are at that point. And also once I get more dialed in, talking to some other people about this. And if you want to recommend anybody to also do like a long format talk about their experience, I'd be more than happy to talk to them individually. But yeah, just personally want to say thank you for doing this. And
no problem.
yeah, and time is time, and I know everyone's time is precious. So, but
not a whole lot going on right now.
Hey, man, you know, the world still doesn't stop moving. That's the way I see it.
True.
When it comes to this kind of, no matter what the situation. That's about it. I'm gonna go eat breakfast and and enjoy the rest of the Memorial Day. So.
Is it Memorial Day?
I think so.
I don't know.
I almost thought it was Labor Day, but then I was like, no, that's not right. Yeah.
That's why people are posting all this American stuff. I keep seeing people post like all this stuff with like American flags and things on Instagram and stuff. That's why I'm very bad at holidays, particularly American holidays. Like I don't know them.
For a long time, that was my case too. And then somehow along the line, I was like, I need to maybe keep up on that, just because it makes it easier to line up with some other things that I work around with. But yeah, no, for the longest time I didn't reflect on those things at all, or think, oh, this is going on. I'd forget my own birthday. Like, you know, it's like I wouldn't even like care. I'm just like, oh, another day. I still gotta get up and do stuff. So what's the difference? You know, if we were in a spaceship, none of this stuff would matter because we're not going around the sun, and that means there's no days. So it's like, whatever.
That's a good point. All
right, man.
The only American holiday I remember ever is July 4th, but I'm not trying to like demean veterans or anything like that. I just don't know their days.
Yeah.
But anyway, dude, thanks for talking. It was a good time. If you have more questions or anything and you want to ask or what, I'm around. Just let me know.
Yeah. Like, I'll get better at these, I'm sure, with the more that I do. And like I said, thanks for being the first.
Yeah.
So, all right, brother. You have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon, okay?